We're very pleased today that our guest speaker is Father Cristian Sonea, and I'd like to introduce you to him. He is an associate professor at the Faculty of Orthodox Theology at Babeș-Bolyai University in Cluj-Napoca, Romania. And he specializes in missiology, and he's published many books and articles on missiological themes. Some of his recent books, to give you an idea of the wide range of his interests, some of his books have the titles such as The Missionary Paradigm from Edinburgh to the Council of Crete, Apostolate and Responsibility, a Theological Vision for the Mission of the Laity, and the Theology of Ecumenical Dialogue. His habilitation thesis, which he completed in 2020, has the title Towards a Prophetic Eschatology, Missionary Ecclesiology in Postmodernity. Alongside his scholarly writing and teaching, Father Cristian is parish priest at the parish of St. Andrew in Cluj. So he also has a pastoral and missionary experience. So, Father Cristian, thank you very much for being with us, and we'd like to give you the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for the invitation. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm a little bit emotional with so many missiologists here, trying to hear humble Romanian saying something about the church mission. And the title is, as it was announced already, Trends and Challenges in Contemporary Romanian Orthodox Missiology. I will start with an introduction, historical introduction about the history of the Orthodox Church in Romania. It's important for non-Romanians and for non-Orthodox to understand the context of the life of the Church in this part of Europe. Then I will present in very short the trends in mission studies in the last 100 years, just few sentences, and I will mention the authors and the directions in research. And then I will name the challenges, but because I identified 7 challenges in our context, and because I don't want to be just an enumeration of some problems, I stopped to the first 2. Which are the missionary pastoral work in the former communist countries, is Romania, and the missionary pastoral work in diaspora, in Romanian diaspora, especially, not in all Orthodox diaspora. So I will start now. The Romanian Orthodox Church, just as almost all the other Orthodox churches, went through a lot of developments and shifting theological approaches. Obviously, there are some specific traits that make the Romanian Orthodox Church unique in her way of living the faith. Like the other countries from the Balkans, Romania was under the Turkish occupation, so the Orthodox Church had to obey to the ecumenical patriarch, not only from the ecclesiastical point of view, but also from a cultural and economic point of view. The ecumenical patriarch became the leader, ethnarch, of the Christian community within the Ottoman Empire and transferred the Byzantine heritage from the political and theological register to a nationalistic one, supporting the Greek Compana. The Romanian Orthodoxy developed in a space that roughly covered territories from north of Danube and around the Carpathian Mountains. Having Latin roots, it affirms itself in a Slavonic and Byzantine form at the beginning of 14th century as an autonomous metropolis in Moldavia and Wallachia. Moldavia is in the western part of Romania and Wallachia is the southern part of Romania, under the jurisdiction of the ecumenical patriarchy. The Orthodoxy in Transylvania, which is the place where I live, is the northwest part of Romania. However, developed in a different circumstances as it had to survive the successive occupation of the Kingdom of Apostolic Hungary, beginning with 10th century, when Romanians were considered a tolerated nation and the Orthodox faith also tolerated religion. Or in Moldavia and Wallachia, the specificity of the Romanian Orthodoxy was expressed in the architectural monuments and paintings from 14th to 16th century, often called theology in colors, perhaps as a reaction to the aniconic Islam. In 17th century, the Romanian principalities become the center of resistance against the Roman Catholic and Protestant proselytism, playing an important role in defending the ecumenical orthodoxy. Thus, the historical context shaped the missionary understanding of the church as a mission of the resistance, and these contextual realities have influenced missionary formation until today. In the 19th century, with help from Tsarist Empire, the countries from the Balkans liberated themselves from the Ottoman domination, but didn't manage to stabilize the independency and the national unity before finally accepting German Roman Catholic kings or rulers, Otto of Bavaria in Greece, Carol of Hohenzollern in Romania, and Alexander Bettenberg in Bulgaria. The newborn national states fought for recognition and at the ecclesiastic level by proclaiming the autocephaly of the local Orthodox churches. After some conflicts and tension with the ecumenical patriarchate, the autocephaly of the Orthodox Church from Romania United Principalities was recognized in 1889, followed by the Patriarchate of Great Romania in 1925. So, in this tensioned environment, the Romanian Orthodox Church fought to define herself in the pan-Orthodox world and to receive credit from the other Orthodox churches and from the new established political regime. We call this work the mission of the recognition, which again shaped to a great deal the Romanian theology in general and the Romanian missiology in special. After a brief period of freedom, when the church started to develop a modern missiology, the communist regime came and the missionary work of the church was excluded from the public sphere and only tolerated in the ecclesiastical environments, with the official program that in 5 decades, the socialist society will become an atheistic one. Under these circumstances, the mission of the church became almost impossible to carry out, and it received a different dimension, coming closer to what we call a mission for survival. At the same time, because of the new political view of the state and the evangelical movements that entered in Romania in the late 19th century and in the beginning of the 20th century, went through difficult times. The fight of the church against the so-called sects was supported by the political regime. Therefore, the missionary research developed in excess as sectology in that time, even today, I would say. In short, this is the historical context that shaped the missionary formation in the Romanian Orthodox Church, from a mission of resistance to a mission of recognition, passing through a mission of survival, and influenced by an important defensive missiology understood as sectology. The missionary formation nowadays hesitates between a very modern paradigm of mission and an old pattern, which in fact mirrors the Romanian contemporary society that is very traditional but simultaneously challenged to face the postmodern philosophy. Now the trends. In this context, in last 100 years, and I mention here 100 years because in 1921, the first missiologist, official missiologist in Romania was Vasile Ispir. We call it the pioneer of the Orthodox modern missiology, published an article called Mission and Defense of the Faith. I translate from Romanian in English. And then in 1929, he published a very modern, I would say, handbook entitled Missionary Guidance Course. This is the first trend. So somehow a modern type of missiology. And so in this handbook, he recepted even the ecumenical meetings and the first ecumenical understanding of the missionary work from Edinburgh and from Lake Mohawk in the United States. This is Vasile Ispir. Then the sectarian direction. There were 4 important figures. Bishop Grigore Comșa of Arad. Arad is a city in the western part of Romania. It was called in his writings the gate of the entering of they called repentance. They were in fact evangelicals, Baptist, Pentecostals, so on. They were called repentance in Romanian tradition, and the Arad was called the gate of the sects that enter in Romania. Then Grigore Leu, Confession and Sects, another historical and missiological study in 1929. Then Petru Deheleanu, a handbook of sectology, and a very famous theologian, Petre David. He was a professor of missiology and ecumenism in Bucharest, and he published a Christian Guide. In fact, it's a book on sectology, call it also sectology, and it was published and reedited in several editions. Then another important figure, which is now, I would say, the most important trend in contemporary Romanian missiology, is Father Ion Bria, Ecumenical Missiology. And just last week, it was printed out, the new handbook on Orthodox missiology from Romanian Orthodox Church. And I call this, because I work on, this is the first volume that was published. I call this handbook an innovative versus a conservative approach in the missiology curriculum, because there are still some topics which are not very comfortable for non-Orthodox Christians, and even for the Orthodox in itself from different parts of Romania. This is regarding the trends. Now, the challenges for the mission studies. I identified 7: missionary pastoral work in the former communist countries, the issue of labor migration in the Romanian Orthodox diaspora, dialogue with the contemporary science and culture, militant secularism, the pan-Orthodox communion, which is, you know very well the situation nowadays, the future of the ecumenical dialogue, and the mission in Roma communities within Romania, And also, as the 8th challenge, but I saw in the program there will be the next webinar on I call it the new, or the new Orthodox churches, the new communities. Of course, new compared with the historical communities. I am referring to the Eastern African Orthodox Church. Father John Goronge is with us, but will be the next webinar. Is not my topic, and I will stay only with the first two topics in this evening. The first 2 challenges. So, missionary pastoral work in the former communist countries. As a general challenge, you can go further with the next slide, Evie. It's a challenge for the missionary formation in itself. It's the plea for a transformative theology, because in our understanding, theological education is not only about what we teach or what we learn, but also about who or how we are and how we live theology. The theological training in the Orthodox understanding is more a process of mystagogy than a process of pedagogy. And I think this is also a challenge for the entire theological education, not only for the mission studies. Now we can go forward. Missionary pastoral work during communism. This is part of the challenge in a post-communist country. During the communist regime, the missionary work of the church was, as I said before, excluded from the public sphere and tolerated only in the ecclesiastical environments. However, Romania remained, for the most part of the 20th century, an agrarian country. Although it went through a process of heavy industrialization, still the mentality of those who populated the towns and cities, most of whom were the first generation to leave the villages, remained ancestral. Their beliefs, values, and views on reality were those of their parents, who lived in tight-knit communities and in deep communion with nature. This organic way of understanding reality and their relationship with God made it difficult for the regime to isolate the church from the life of the community. In fact, even the communist leaders seemed to be unconsciously influenced by the worldview that they had inherited from their parents. There is a rather famous story about the absurdity of those times. In 1974, when Ceausescu became the president of the Republic, he was given a king-like presidency. On the occasion, Salvador Dali sent him the following telegram: "We deeply appreciate your historical decision to establish a presidential scepter. The official communist newspapers didn't identify the sarcasm of the Catalan artist and published the telegram, and thus it remained recorded for the years to come. It is just one argument for those who claim that communism, along with fascism, were secular religions and not political regimes. Ceausescu needed a confirmation of a sacred type and felt the need to associate himself with a religious object, which was the scepter. At the same time, because of the new political views, the Western churches that had come to Romania at the beginning of 20th century fell into the category of foreign influences. And so they went through very difficult times. During that time, the missionary work of the church involved mostly fighting against the sects with the support of the regime. Now I come to the contemporary times. Nowadays, most rural communities in the new social and political circumstances are going through a serious demographic crisis, while in the urban communities, the spirit of secularization, which struggles to get rid of any presence of the church in the public sphere, proposes a different kind of solidarity, of challenge. A lot of these impoverishment of communities have lately become the object of a lot of the social activities initiated by the church. Over the last few years, the Synod of the Romanian Orthodox Church paid increased attention to the rural communities. In 2015 was dedicated to the church mission in the parishes and monasteries. In this context, the Romanian Patriarch Daniel explained that many of the parishes and the monasteries in the rural areas are impoverished and depopulated, especially due to migration. Because of it, the children left behind by the parents working abroad abandon school. Also, members of the families grow apart. Some become victims of alcoholism, violence, depression, and suicide. In order to respond to all these challenges and to raise awareness to the difficulties rural areas are facing, 2019 was dedicated the year of the Romanian villages. On this occasion, those involved discussed the pragmatic aspect in which the Romanian Orthodox Church could support the developing of villages from an economic, cultural, or spiritual point of view. Just to give an example, 8,000 people, regardless of their confession, benefit from the project entitled Health for the Countryside. The urban parishes started partnership with the parishes from rural areas in order to improve life in the villages and to support development. The situation, you can see here with the slide, it's good here. The situation in the urban parishes is considerably different. In towns and cities, the communities are much more diverse. Their members are much more mobile than those in the countryside. They move around easily from one province to another. Also, a lot of them have been influenced by individualism, consumerism, and materialism, which seriously affects their spiritual life. Apart from the suffering of the poor, enhanced by the selfishness of those indifferent to their condition, the Christians who live in the city encounter other challenges as well, such as the isolation of the sick and elderly, juvenile offending, drugs consumption, etc. In all these situations, the priest has the mission, both social and spiritual, of transforming within his community the message of healing love of God for the people. The situation varies from one community to another, from one city to another city. University centers, for example, have a different dynamic as far as the organization of the social assistance is concerned. The Romanian Patriarchy offers an interactive map, this is the map, with all the philanthropic organizations belonging to the Orthodox Church. This instrument shows the distribution in cities or the neighboring villages. Without getting into many technical details, we know that in 2018, the Romanian Orthodox Church was the biggest organization providing social services in the country. Also, on February 11th, 2020, at the annual meeting of the Church National Council, it was mentioned the fact that the Romanian Orthodox Church had spent 32 million euros for social for philanthropic activities in 2019. Obviously, this is not enough to cover all the needs, but it points to the fact that the church is at least on the right path when it comes to social assistance, and it is an example of social solidarity. Now, the second part, which is more extensive in my presentation, is the second challenge, the issue of labor migration in Romanian Orthodox diaspora. Next slide, please. So other reality today society is confronting with is labor migration. According to the last official data, 9.7 Romanians are living in other countries, mostly in wealthier Western European countries. In fact, 5.6 million Romanians live now in diaspora, while the others are considered to be part of the historical communities in neighboring countries, mostly in the Republic of Moldova, once part of Romania, and in Ukraine. Next slide, please. For obvious reasons, pastoral work involving migrants represents a new challenge for all the churches, not only from the Romanian Orthodox Church. Using the term diaspora to describe Orthodox communities is considered by many an obstacle in the effort to achieve jurisdictional unity in this area, which has not yet been defined canonically. The word diaspora implies a grouping of Orthodox believers according to national criteria, to the disadvantage of church unity as a criterion. It is true that most of the Orthodox communities outside the borders of the canonical territories of the autocephalous Orthodox churches formed as a consequence of migration. And it was only natural for them to have their own churches and priests where they settled. On the other hand, as these communities settled and Orthodoxy became better known, many Christians of other confessions or non-Christians embraced the Orthodox faith. They were integrated into the national churches, but to use of the term diaspora for them is inappropriate. Furthermore, as time went by and given the mixed marriages performed in the church, many of the Christians coming from families of migrants also become locals. They belong both to their parents' and grandparents' culture and to the culture of the host country. The term diaspora is also inappropriate in this case. As the matter of diaspora is extremely complex, the missionary consciousness that develops within these communities is also complex, fluctuating between preserving the ethnic consciousness and developing a universal pan-Orthodox consciousness. Even after the Orthodox churches have functioned for quite some time in diaspora, they are, in the words of Metropolitan Alfeev Hilarion from Russia, I quote, still badly equipped to receive new believers. End of quotation. So this situation is not only in the Romanian Orthodox Church, but probably also in the other Orthodox churches in diaspora. But for this presentation, I will use the term diaspora because it's a technical term and somehow it has a history in this kind of research. Now, next slide, please. I will stop with the immigrants' needs and the localization of faith as a theoretical part of this subchapter of my presentation, and then I will have some more practical one in the end of this subchapter dedicated to diaspora. Based on Charles Hirschman's 3R system of defining immigrants' needs, refuge, respect, resources, Berit Torbornstrul offer an interesting analysis of the new wave of Orthodox immigrants in Norway, especially and in Western Europe. Alienation, he said, alienation, lack of recognition, stereotypes about some ethnic groups make immigrants feel vulnerable. Because of this, they tend to stay close to their national communities, as that is where they feel they belong or they feel safe. Consequently, the national consciousness is cultivated and is associated with the identity they are trying to preserve. The immigrants belonging to the recent wave have a stronger sense of national identity. They feel they are Romanian, Bulgarian, Serbian, or Russian, and they often think of their situation as being temporary, and they plan to return to their home countries sooner or later. According to Romanian Metropolitan Iosif Pov of Paris, since in countries such Italy, Spain, or Portugal, there are a lot of Romanian migrants, in some cases over 1 million per country, the numbers of those attending church services is high, and attention is focused mainly on the Romanians themselves. They are trying to preserve their Orthodox identity, of which they only became aware when they entered in a non-Orthodox environment. I was asked about Roman Catholic theologian from Germany, if the Romanians that are now living in Germany, when they are coming home, are more open to the others. In fact, the reaction is another way around, because sometimes they are rejected in different communities. They tend to stay close to their national community and to reject the foreigners, even they live in a different space, not in their country. No. The situation, it is different. It's eventually different in older communities from diaspora, where the Orthodox believers have gained a missionary consciousness and are more willing to become involved in the process of encouraging new members to join their communities. As an example, according to the statistics of the Romanian parish in Munich, Germany, over a period of 7 years, 2010-2017, 49 new converts joined the church from different denomination and non-religious. So after a period of adaptation to the new life and after being fully integrated into the country of adoption, Orthodox believers seems more interested in witnessing to their faith. In the older diaspora, the missionary programs of the parishes include topics such as the dialogue between theology and science. There is an interesting situation in Paris. In Paris, there are two Romanian communities. One new, with a new wave after 2007 and after 1919, and the old one, which was established during the communist time, when in 60s the Communist Party allowed those who are not in line with the politics to go outside, and they formed anti-communist Romanian communities in Russia, in France, in Paris, in England, and even in Germany. So it's about this kind of community, and they developed a new approach to the world and to the others, to the foreigner. And now this is the moment of localization, and I read an interesting article done by Victor Ludometov, and he identifies 4 forms of localization. And he said, can go forward with the next slide, please. This is them. So 4 forms of localization. Or what is in fact localization? Is the content which is local became local in a global context. This is localization. Like Orthodoxy, which is very local for our countries, became local in a global context somehow, and try to integrate it in a global context, in a global situation. And the 4 forms of localization: indigenization, vernacularization, nationalization, and transnationalization. Vernaculation refers to the use of vernacular languages in the church liturgical and spiritual life, while indigenization connects different faith to ethnic groups to the point where religion and culture are merged. Nationalization, on the other hand, is more related to the consolidation of some nations with certain confession and is specific to the Eastern context, Eastern European context. Transnationalization, explains Rudometov, has complemented religious nationalization by forcing groups to identify with specific religious traditions of real or imagined national homelands, or to adopt a universal vision of religion. In this specific context, the Orthodox diaspora, we find all forms of localization, vernacularization to the translation of the liturgy in other religious services and other religious services into the languages of the adoptive country. This is the Romanian case. Indigenization by adapting the religious life to the local culture, nationalization by preserving and cultivating a national consciousness outside Romania, and transnationalization by going beyond the ethnic element of the Orthodox communities and by integrating into a larger multi-ethnic Orthodox community, as in the case of some of the Romanian communities in the United States that belong to the Orthodox Church of America, OCA. Not all the Romanian communities from the United States belong to that church, but there are some from the old waves. All this take place through something which is called a process of hybridization. In Italy, the reproduction of the Romanian identity is articulated through a path marked by its hybridization with the social cultural context. Now, the second part, please, next slide, is more practical and more applied. So I will talk the effects of immigration. I don't know in English if there is a distinction when we say immigration and immigration. The immigration with A and immigration with E. Immigration when the people is going out from the country, and immigration when the people is entering the country. I refer here to the immigration, that process when the people leave their country and go abroad. The following graphic shows the situation in numbers of the baptisms, marriages, and funerals in the rural areas of Cluj Bishopric. Please go back to the previous slide. No, here, sorry. In between 2012 and 2017. I choose for my study 4 parishes of different grades. We call grades according to the number of members. You can see here, those are 4 communities from rural areas. The first one with 1,000 members and so on, so on. And in this green line, you can see the number of the people that are immigrants. They left the village or the community to work outside, to work abroad. In the first case, it's almost a quarter for the population that is living now abroad. So this is the effect of the migration in Romania, in the host country, not in the foreign country. We can observe that in 3 from 4 cases, the number of funerals is, yes. Also, we can talk about an decline, and demographic decline caused not only by migration, but also migration contributes to that demographic decline, which is called stable demographic decline, meaning that in each year is the same tendency. Because of this reality, the average age of the people in the Orthodox community is quite high. In the next graphic, in this one, we can see the situation of the rural Orthodox communities with an age average over 65, from a total number of 176 communities in our bishopric. In 36, the percentages of the people over 65 is between 80 to 89. I group the communities by deaneries. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 deaneries, and those are the percentages you can see here. So the people with over 65, those are the retired people. So I would say those communities are dying slowly by slowly. Now, this is the situation in Romania caused by the migration. Now, how is the situation in diaspora, in the foreign countries? And to map this situation, I applied some interviews. This research is not from now. I did it for another conference focused on labor migration, and I applied some interviews and some questionnaires to priests and the believers in different communities in diaspora. And what I observed, because of the increasing number of migrants in diaspora, we could notice a change in the pastoral work with the Orthodox Christians. If before 1990s there were different kinds of need in the pastoral work, now we can say that there is a switch from urgency pastoral work to proximity pastoral work. What is the meaning of urgency pastoral work? Before 1990, there were just few Orthodox families outside Romania, so not so many like now, and they asked for the religious services when they need, not on, let's say, in a regular way, for baptism, for funeral, for marriages. So I call that urgent pastoral work. And now we face the proximity pastoral care, because the priests are there with the community. According to the priests that I interviewed, the communities grow rapidly. For instance, in London in 2011, in the Romanian Orthodox parish of St. George, the Great Martyr, 701 baptisms were registered in 1 year, 2011. As Alison told you in the beginning of my introduction, I serve as a priest in a parish. I'm not the dean of the parish, but I serve there as a parish, as a priest in a parish. And I know from our statistics, we had last year, let's say not last year, but years before, because it was a different time, not with this virus and this epidemic, only more than, I think, 42 or 43 baptisms in our parish. Can you compare 40 baptisms with 700 baptisms in London? Of course, it's not only in my parish, but still, this is a region with majority Orthodox people, more than 86%. In Brussels, the first Romanian parish grew from just some believers to thousands. Here, around 600 people regularly take part in the liturgy. The parish has its own church building, and it is a small Romania. The believers coming from all over Romania, and the average age is 35, compared with our communities in Cluj Bishopric. So the young people are now in diaspora. Another example is the parish St. Apostle Peter and Paul from Padova. It was established in 1996, and now they have their own church building, and each Sunday around 500 people take part in the liturgy. They organize the life of the parish like in Romania: Holy Liturgy, sacraments, catechesis programs, Bible study, pilgrimages, summer camps for kids and youth. And he said that the priest, I quote, "Many baptisms and very few funerals." We can easily see the difference between the dynamic in the parishes in diaspora and in Romania. It seems that in few years, the priests from Romania will have to focus on the counseling, the elderly, and on funerals, while those abroad will have to take care of a large number of Orthodox Romanians outside the country. Under these circumstances, some questions arise. What is the motivation of the Romanians in diaspora, of course, to go to church? Will the religiosity of Romanians be the same in the secularized context of the Western world? How does priesthood look like in the non-Orthodox country? Yeah, the slide is good. From the external secondary motivations to the intrinsic motivations, from network to community. As I could notice from the interviews, the first motivation of Romanians in diaspora was not always a religious one or a purely spiritual one. There are some secondary motivations that drive the Romanians Orthodox believers to church, such as homesickness, the role of the church community as a hub or a networking zone, where many of them can find job offers, employment opportunities, etc. The need to preserve their national identity, or the fear that they may lose it, especially for those over 45 years old. Also, the respondents think that the church gives the feeling that they are not lost, the feeling of something real, the feeling of stability or of security. If you analyze their answers, a little deeper, we will find out that they are in fact looking for something totally different than their daily life. I would say that they are looking for a spiritual experience. They are looking for God, even they aren't aware of it. So under these circumstances, the priest in diaspora must know how to convert their searching for something vague, into searching for something real. There is a need to convert the motivations. Now, the challenges for the Orthodox believers in diaspora, the challenges of secularization for Orthodox believers. Again, from the answers we analyzed, we noticed there is a family crisis even in diaspora. Some of the Romanians have a liberal understanding of what marriage means, and for these reasons, there are consequences such as depression, loneliness, sadness, etc. They are, in the words of Romanian priests, isolated on a crowded island. And also, now it's not from my interviews, it's from my observation and from my talkings with a friend who is now priest in Madrid. And he said that there are many families separated. The female or the husband or the wife is working abroad, and the other one stays in Romania with their kids. And he told me that it's very, from the moral point of view, he said more than 80% of the Romanians that are working abroad in his community, they have a double life. They have another situation. They're another kind of family, not a family, but they live with other persons outside their family. This is an issue for the church, I would say. Yeah, we must also consider the psychology of the migrant. This is a very interesting observation from a priest from Brussels. He said, I quote, "They have the capacity to leave the traditional background for an experience which involves risks and community and unforeseen situations. The migrant leaves his or her native country for a better life and is capable of taking up big risks and of making efforts to get what they want. Being faithful helps them moderate and control these tendencies by thinking about God and taking into account the spiritual values, because they think that they are there for just a short time. They can do bad things, even immoral things, because they need money in very short time, and they are able to do things that in Romania are not able to do it. Now is the situation of the priests in diaspora, the Orthodox priests in non-Orthodox context. Priesthood as a second job. An interesting issue that arose from the interviews was that of the needs of the priests living and working in diaspora. Most of them work to support their families, therefore a second qualification apart that of the priest is needed. Here are some opinions of the priests that work in diaspora. A priest from diaspora must be able to do complementary activities in order to be able to finance and support their family life. In the Western society, priesthood cannot provide the necessary income for a family. I mean the Orthodox priesthood of the Romanian communities, not the priesthood in general. At least, another one said, at least one extra job, currently two. Another one, the priest needs to be ready for continuous training and retraining. As soon as a priest becomes less able to adapt, he starts losing his connection with real life and with the people, and this has consequences. You are therefore left with the following question. Is priesthood the main concern for the Romanian Orthodox priests from diaspora, or is priesthood a second job? It would be interesting to develop a new understanding for priesthood in diaspora. In such cases, the preparation of a future priest must be reconsidered. The issue of the mixed marriages and the converts to the Orthodox Church. The number of the mixed marriages is not as big as I expected. Taking into consideration that the research was focused on the labor migrants in the European Union, this probably explains why. This is the first generation of labor migrants in EU, and they left Romania thinking about returning home. It will be very interesting to investigate the communities of Romanians at the second generation abroad. It is very likely that the situation will be totally different. Still, we found the following surprising answer from a priest from England. I quote, "I try to reduce the pressure that the Orthodox oaths tends to put on the non-Orthodox spouse regarding a conversion to Orthodoxy. Quite a few times I've noticed the hurry to baptize the non-Orthodox future spouse without him or her being ready for it. The answer suggests that there have been some bad experiences with those that became Orthodox because of a mixed marriage, and now the priest is more careful in this issue. In my interpretation, priests are looking for a real conversion to the church, not to a formal one as part of the marriage arrangement. I think I will skip this part and I will go to the conclusions. Also, there are some opportunities in diaspora, just to see the opportunities, and maybe you can discuss about that. It's an opportunity for a pan-Orthodox collaboration and for an ecumenical collaboration, and there are some good examples in this respect, in this direction. The conclusions, missiological and pastoral implications as conclusions. So, we call the activity in diaspora pastoral care work, but still it has profound missiological implications. Therefore, I would call it pastoral missiology. And now I will explain my point of view. First point, we usually talk about Eastern Orthodox theology, and I underline Eastern because of the origin of the theology in the Eastern Church. In this sense, some would say that it is a contextual theology, a theology from the East. But today we can find both the theology of the East and the Eastern Church in the Western world. I think that in the future, maybe even now, we will be able to talk about an orthodoxy of the West and about a Western Orthodox theology, not only for an Orthodox theology from diaspora. This could be a new way of indigenization of the faith. I think this is already happened. But it will be the situation even for the Romanian theology and for the Romanian church in the future, probably. Second point, the mission has an important focus. Conversion. In diaspora, the Orthodox Church must work for the conversion of the motivation, for the external motivations to the intrinsic motivation. The search for God must be primary reason to enter the church, the need for salvation. That means the priest from diaspora must develop the pastoral missionary work to convert the hub into a community of faith. Third point, the diaspora and the democratic reality in Romania challenge the theological education. In the future, we must think very seriously about the training of our future priests. What is very clear, in some cases, the priests have to have another job in order to support their family. Even in Romania is the case now in some parts. What would priests would mean in this case? What job can a priest have? What would a theological program look like in a situation in which the future priest would receive a second specialization? Fourth point, counseling the converts within the mixed marriages, and not only. The final aspect regarding migration is that of the mixed marriages and the converts to the Orthodox Church. The number of the converts to the Orthodox Church has grown considerably in the last century, in comparison with the previous ones. Converts represent the subject of a very delicate missionary work, and our priests, as well as the rest of the believers, are not always prepared for it. The phenomenon is present in many Orthodox churches, not only Romania. But if you ask ourselves why not all the converts remain in the church, the answer may be that we are not fully prepared to receive them and to offer them appropriate help and attention. 5 point. We haven't approached yet the issue of the second or third generation of Romanian Orthodox in diaspora. Maybe for the EU context, the experience of the Orthodox diaspora from the United States would be a good starting point. Here comes the need to convert the philletism, to overcome the philletism and nationalism. The need to be more aware about the universality of the church than the nationalistic understanding. I know an Orthodox Romanian community in the United States, established there during the communist regime. They don't speak Romanian anymore. They even have an Orthodox priest converted from the Lutheran tradition, and they still call themselves Romanian Church. They have an interesting understanding of the Orthodox faith. They would ask you, do you want to become Romanian? They understand Orthodoxy through the Romanian identity. In this case, the nationality overcomes the limited meaning of being Orthodox, offering an universal understanding. Last point, it's the document Orthodox the Diaspora, produced by the Holy and Great Council from Crete. That is a proof that diaspora is a very important topic within the Orthodox Church herself, and also a hot potato for the internal discussions on the diaspora situation, which is not, I think, resolved yet. Thank you very much for your attention.